Alright, you have no idea how much I'm looking forward to this video because after all these years, all these requests, all these demands, I finally get the opportunity to get a little culture into this joint, and God knows we could use it around here. So let's go ahead and get started. And what? I'm sorry, what? Oh, that Poe. Excuse me. Well, here's your first lesson on Power over Ethernet. You don't pronounce it POE. You do pronounce it POE. And sorry for the gap here in the middle. It's one of those formatting things. We've all been there. That point where you have one too many devices to plug in. And we're getting ready to move into, thanks to your support, a new studio and a new work area, and we're very excited about it. One reason, it actually has windows so we can see the outside world, and secondly, the wall outlets, because you know the deal, and I'm not even talking just in a server room, I'm talking just in any kind of office. And even when you get extension cords and the things you plug in, that have 6 plugs on them, well, sometimes you can only plug 3 things into those things because the adapters are so big. And when you get into a server room and you're looking for one more plug in there and you got all these cables running everywhere, it can really get to be a bit of a nightmare. And, let's just take this IP phone, for example. You got a new IP phone you're installing. Well, wouldn't it be great if we could get power from a device that we have to connect to anyway, rather than struggling to find that available outlet? Well, in many cases today, we can actually get power for the phone and certain other networking devices directly from the switch we're already connected to via the magic and science of Power over Ethernet, PoE. And it's mostly the science. There's not really much magic involved. But what actually happens is, after these two devices have a little conversation, the switch starts to give the necessary amount of power to the phone or whatever particular device is on the other end of that connection. Now, before we see it in action, I want to talk about the standards and the development of PoE a bit. And the first one actually came from Cisco. It did not come from the IEEE. Cisco came up with a PoE standard first. Now, this original standard is Cisco Inline Power, and it uses Cisco Discovery Protocol, CDP, to negotiate the amount of power this switch should deliver to the device. Now, it was limited to 7 watts per port, or is limited to 7 watts per port. It still exists. And it's limited to fast Ethernet and fast Ethernet ports. No gig Ethernet support with Cisco Inline Power. But hey, we didn't care. Wireless networking had limitations at first too, but we were so crazy about it, we didn't care about the limitations. We had Power over Ethernet. Of course, us being us, network admins being network admins, we always want a little bit more. And thankfully, the IEEE came up with a couple of standards to help us out. First, they came out with 802.3AF, which can have a -2003 on the end of it in some documentation referring to the year it was released. Now, this particular standard can theoretically deliver 15.4 watts of power, but it is assumed that approximately 2.4 watts of that power is lost during the transmission from device to device. This standard, though, does support Power over Ethernet over gig Ethernet ports, so that was a big step forward. That IEEE PoE standard was followed by another one in 2009, 802.3AT, which again can have a -2009 on the end of it, but it's generally referred to as PoE+. Now, this standard is backwards compatible with 802.3AF, and it can deliver up to 25.5 watts. So we're getting a little more power as we march on. Now, the latest, and many would say the greatest PoE implementation, is Cisco's Universal Power over Ethernet, UPoE. And unlike the other standards, which can only use 2 sets of wires, UPoE can use all 4 pair of wires in the cable and can deliver up to 60 watts. So what's not to love, right? Well, the only issue with UPoE is it's not, I don't want to say not widely available yet, but only certain Cisco switch models can run them. A lot of earlier switch models that can run other forms of PoE cannot run UPoE, so it's something you need to be aware of when you're making your purchasing decisions. Now, on the switch I'm going to bring up in a moment, it's going to look a little different than the other labs here in this course. And also, it's already in action on the switch. I have an IP phone connected to it, But first off, we really need to know which port the phone is connected to. So what command would show me that? Let me bring that up just a tad here. There we go. What command can show me an IP phone, a Cisco IP phone that's directly connected to this switch? Boy, you think that CDP is going to be just something you learn in your CCNP or CCNA studies and you never think about it again. And by golly, here it is. And we've got a couple of devices here, and you see the device IDs, local interface. We're familiar with all this output. But over here on platform, you can see that one of these devices is an IP phone, and it's the device on 0/48. So let me move this back up. This is a remote connection, so it's a little tougher to work with. There we go. So we know that our device is on 0/48. And the command to see what's going on right now with your power over Ethernet is show inline power. And let me run that for you here. Oh, excuse me, show power inline. Sorry about that. Well, when you run that command, you're going to get the PoE information for every single port on the switch. And of course, we might not want the information for every port on the switch. I'll show you how to filter this in just a moment. There's one piece of information, though, at the top that I wanted you to see. Let me bring that up on the PDF real quick. When you look at the top of show power inline, it's going to have values for how much wattage is available, how much is being used, and how much remains. And that's at the very top of that output. Let me see if I can bring that up, because this is a little slower than what we usually use. Yep, there we go. Patience is a virtue, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. Almost there. Sorry about that. I'm just trying not to move it too far to the side. So I've got show power inline, and again at the very top, it's going to show you how much power is available, how much is being used, and how much remains. So to filter that output just a little bit here, we're going to go with show power inline, and then you can name the actual interface. And you can see here we've got the same headings: interface, admin, oper for operation, power, device, class, and max. Most of those are self-explanatory, but let's go over all of them anyway. Interface, obviously the local interface on the switch. Admin, that is the administrative mode that PoE is running on that particular interface, and we're going to spend quite a bit of time in the next video looking at the different admin modes. Operation, it's either on or it's off. I have seen it error disabled on an error disabled port, but generally you're going to see off or on. Now notice on all the ones you can see here, fast zeros 25 through 41, all of those have 0.0 for power. And this port has 6.3, and it even mentions that this is in watts. What that means, this is the actual power being delivered. We talk a lot in PoE about maximum power, how much a device can request, how much the port can supply, etc. But this output under power shows us the actual amount of power the switch is sending to that device. Then very helpfully, next it tells us here's the device, IP phone 7940 model. Class, we have N/A. We're coming back to that in the beginning of the next video. And max. And actually, let's talk about those last two right now, class and max. The class is listed as N/A, which could be no answer. It could be not available. It could be not applicable. And max is 15.4, but it's not really saying what. It doesn't even say watts like power does. So let's go back up here, and we're going to talk about those classes a little bit. Now, class refers to, hopefully, one of 5 power classes, predefined power classes, the connected device could belong to. Now, sometimes you're going to see a number there, and sometimes you're going to see what we just saw on the switch, N/A. When that happens, that device is said to belong to power class 0. And that's also why we see 15.4 under max, because when you see NA and you've got a device in power class 0, the maximum power being offered the device is 15.4 watts. So I know you've got this down because you got everything else down in this course, and there's a lot more complicated material in here. But the key here is know which column is telling you the actual power that's being delivered and which one is telling you how much power could be delivered. And of course, that's going to be max. Now, it could not hurt to know these other numeric classes. Power class 1 is going to deliver a maximum of 4 watts. Power class 2, a maximum of 7 watts. Power class 3, also a maximum of 15.4 watts. Certainly sounds familiar. And power class 4 is a maximum of 30 watts. What we're going to do at the beginning of the very next video is look at these admin states and draw some very clear lines here as to what they do and one classic gotcha that I want you to look out for. We'll take care of that on the very next video.